Have you ever sat quietly in your living room, perhaps early in the morning or late at night, and wondered when your life seemed to shrink? When the roles that once defined you, parent, colleague, partner, slipped away like sand through your fingers, leaving behind a quiet emptiness. It's not a dramatic loss, like losing a spouse or siblings. It's gradual, almost gentle. But one day, you find yourself asking a question you never thought you'd ask. What am I for now? You might feel unnecessary, overqualified for small tasks, unseen for the parts of you that still matter. Because society tends to revere youth, and even within families, the attention shifts toward those who still need guidance, help, teaching. When your days become less about giving and more about being, it can feel like suddenly you don't belong in the story you once starred in. Take Frank, 75. For example, he used to wake up with a sense of purpose, a garage full of tools waiting, projects around the house, help needed by neighbors or grandchildren. He loved being useful. Then retirement happened. His wife passed. The grandkids grew up. Visits became infrequent. His phone went silent. And one morning, he realized he hadn't fixed anything or been asked to for months. He looked at his hands and asked, "What am I for now?" It's not a question you say out loud. You say it in your head. And saying it even quietly can feel like an admission of failure. But feeling useless doesn't mean you are useless. It means you've lost sight of your worth, separate from what you do. There's a widow, Margaret, who was deeply respected in her church. She organized events. She cooked meals. But once she stopped doing those things, she began to feel invisible. That invisibility whispered lies. You're done. You're obsolete. And she felt herself shrinking. It's easy to let your worth become tied up in output, especially after 60. We've lived a half century or more giving. That's all we've known. But what if your worth is not conditional on productivity? What if, instead, your value grows deeper, quieter, stronger? This video isn't about filling your days with busyness or telling you to stay active like a slogan. It's about shifting the way you think about your life now. It's about changing the internal narrative that says, I'm only useful if I'm needed. Because usefulness, real, meaningful usefulness, never dies. It simply changes form. We'll explore 6 powerful mindset shifts, subtle, gentle, but transformative. Each one builds on the last. They aren't tasks. They're ways of thinking differently, ways of seeing yourself, your wisdom, your presence, your humanity not as a fading ember, but as a quiet flame that still warms and lights. The first shift lands right here. In the aftermath of feeling purposeless, it whispers, you're more than your roles. Frank realized this when he stopped waiting for a project to assign him and started noticing the sunrise, the gentle hum of his home, the memories carried in the smell of old wood. He remembered he was a man who loved beauty, history, storytelling, not just fixing leaks. And that realization began to untangle his worth from his usefulness. What if, just for a moment, you look at yourself not through the lens of what you do, but what you are, a source of warmth, a keeper of memory, a living link to everything that came before and everything that's still to come. Let the ache you feel be an invitation not to do more, but to see more. See the value in your presence, your listening, your stories, because someone, somewhere, is quietly waiting to hear your counsel. Maybe they just don't know to ask yet. And that reminds us of the second shift. Wisdom is timeless, not transactional. Margaret learned this too. After her official volunteer roles changed, she began writing letters to friends, sharing stories from decades ago. She didn't post them to Facebook or create a blog. She sent them by mail, and the responses surprised her handwritten cards. Gratitude. Memories reopened. She realized that her value wasn't lost. It just had a different medium. Maybe that medium for you is a conversation, a memory shared at dinner, a joke told just right, a tradition you remember. These may not feel like real contributions, but they are, because wisdom isn't about being needed. It's about speaking, and when you speak from the fullness of your experience, your words carry weight. These shifts seeing your worth beyond roles, finding ways to share wisdom quietly. These are the first breaths of a new chapter. A chapter where the question isn't, am I needed? But do I matter? And the answer isn't vague. It's absolutely yes. Let that sink in before you go on. Because meaningful change doesn't happen while rushing. It happens when you pause, breathe, give space for a new idea to settle in. If this felt true, like a small tickle of hope, then you're ready. There's a certain silence that settles in when your calendar no longer fills itself, when your phone doesn't ring with requests, when no one knocks on your door asking for advice or a ride or a recipe. And in that silence, a question echoes. Does anyone still see me? But maybe the more powerful question is, do I still see myself after 60? So much of life changes, not always in loud ways. Sometimes it's the way people speak to you more slowly, or with a faint hint of condescension. Sometimes it's that moment in a family gathering when the conversation moves on without you. And sometimes it's the invisible feeling that you're expected to smile, nod, and stay quiet. That your opinions have expired like old milk, but you are not expired. You are evolving. And one of the most powerful mindset shifts comes right here. Stop measuring your value by others' attention. Your worth is not in how often they call. It's not in how much they ask of you. It's not in whether your children seek your advice or your grandchildren remember your birthday. If you make your value dependent on their behavior, you'll always feel at their mercy. Let's take Sophie as an example. She raised 3 children, worked part-time, supported her husband's business, and kept the family afloat through hard years. But in her late 60s, after becoming a widow and watching her children grow into busy, distracted adults, she felt discarded. The first year, she called them every weekend, left voicemails, sent thoughtful gifts. Sometimes she'd get a reply, most times, silence. And the silence turned into self-blame. But then something shifted. One day, she stopped. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. She realized that chasing their attention only deepened her pain. So instead, she started walking. Literally, each morning, Sophie got up, put on her shoes, and walked. Not far, not fast, but purposefully. She walked to notice birds, flowers, the smell of the bakery on the corner, and bit by bit, her inner world grew fuller. This brings us to a subtle truth. Peace is built inside, not given from outside. You don't need permission to matter. You don't need applause to feel alive. You only need presence, the willingness to be with yourself, without judgment. And that's something many people avoid even in their later years, because silence can be uncomfortable. We're not always taught how to enjoy our own company, but solitude doesn't mean loneliness. In fact, one of the most sacred forms of love is self-companionship, sitting with your thoughts, drinking tea slowly, remembering your own childhood not with sadness, but with appreciation. Caleb, an old friend of mine, used to say, if you treat yourself like a guest of honor, eventually others will too. That was his way of reminding us that how we hold ourselves sets the tone. You don't need to demand respect with words. You invite it with presence. Another woman I met, Grace, found peace in painting. She hadn't picked up a brush in 40 years, but one rainy afternoon, feeling a bit adrift, she opened an old drawer and found a watercolor kit she used to use with her daughter. The paper was yellowed, but the paint still worked. And for the first time in a long while, she felt connected not to others, but to herself. That small act of creation rekindled a spark. Sometimes, reclaiming your worth doesn't begin with a grand gesture. It begins with a quiet yes to yourself, a yes to small joys, a yes to expressing, not impressing, a yes to being fully human, even when no one's watching. And let's not forget the 4th mindset shift. It's okay to let go of the need to be everything to everyone. You spent decades holding others. Now it's your time to release the weight. That doesn't mean closing your heart. It means setting it down gently. Jack, a father of 4, once shared something raw. I gave up my hobbies, my friends, my passions, all to be there for them. And I don't regret it. But I lost myself somewhere along the way. And now, they don't need me the way they did. And I don't know who I am without them needing me. That moment of realization was painful, But it was also freeing because it meant Jack could begin the beautiful, sometimes scary journey back to himself. He took up guitar again, started going to community meetups, took a trip by himself to a national park he'd always wanted to see. The truth is, you can still love your family deeply and let go of the illusion that your only worth is in what you do for them. You don't stop being important when you stop being central. You simply shift from center stage to the soul of the story, the quiet, powerful presence that steadies everything, even from the sidelines. So if today feels like you've been forgotten or set aside, remember this: you haven't been erased. You've just been invited into a different kind of presence, one that doesn't need loud declarations or constant proof, one that blooms in silence, in wisdom, and in stillness. Your story isn't over. It's unfolding inward now, and in that unfolding, there is still beauty, purpose, and light. The kind of light that doesn't ask for attention but cannot be ignored. When you're ready, we'll continue. There's more to reclaim, more to rediscover, and always more to feel. There's something almost sacred about the quiet that arrives after we've stopped trying to be everything for everyone, when we no longer rush to answer every call, meet every need, or anticipate every possible problem before it arises. We begin to hear ourselves again, not the anxious version, not the disappointed version, but the version that's been patiently waiting for space to speak, the one that remembers who we were before we became caretakers, workers, problem solvers. That voice doesn't demand anything. It just reminds us of how we used to laugh at small things, how a walk through the park used to feel like freedom, how a pot of soup made from scratch felt like love. It reminds us that worth has nothing to do with utility and everything to do with being Frank, a former carpenter, once told me that retirement didn't just take away his income, it took away his identity. For years, he was the one people called when something broke, the man with strong hands and quick answers. But after he stopped working, no one seemed to need him the same way, and for a while, that felt unbearable. He said, "I was still here, but I felt like I'd vanished." But over time, something shifted. One afternoon, he saw a bench in the park with a broken armrest. Out of habit, he reached into his old tool bag, fixed it, and sat down. The next day, a woman walking her dog thanked him. The day after, someone left a note. No paycheck, no fanfare, just quiet appreciation. That was the moment he realized he hadn't vanished. He had simply been looking for value in the wrong places. And this brings us to another powerful shift. Let your presence be your contribution. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to explain your worth. You simply have to be fully, calmly, with dignity. That in itself creates ripple effects. It's not about doing more. It's about being more deeply who you are. Margaret, a retired nurse, began volunteering once a week at a local library, not because she needed to be busy, but because she missed connection. She didn't try to prove her expertise or leadership. She just showed up, helped shelve books, talked kindly to patrons, and laughed with the staff. In that small act of consistency, she built something no title could replace. Quiet respect. Sometimes the greatest power isn't in being heard, it's in being grounded. Now let's talk about another shift, one that might be the hardest, but also the most freeing. Stop expecting them to understand your journey. Your adult children, your friends, even your siblings, they may never truly grasp the weight you carry, the identity shifts you've endured, or the emotional valleys you've walked through since 60. And that's okay. Their understanding isn't required for your healing. Helen, for instance, once shared with me that she spent years trying to make her children see how lonely she felt. She'd hint. She'd call more often. She'd offer to help, even when tired, but nothing really changed until one day she stopped waiting for them to get it. She stopped shaping her life around the hope that they might show up differently. And in that release, she found peace. She started attending a meditation group, took a solo trip to a beach town she'd dreamed of visiting since her 30s. She bought herself fresh flowers every week, and guess what? Her kids did notice eventually, not because she complained, but because she was different, lighter, happier, and suddenly, they wanted to be around her energy again. That's the paradox. When you stop chasing connection, the right ones often find you because nothing is more magnetic than a person who is whole within themselves. You see, healing after 60 isn't about rewriting the past or demanding attention. It's about becoming the person you needed when the world seemed too busy to notice you. It's about offering that gentleness to yourself now. Grace, who we mentioned earlier, started writing letters to her younger self, not for anyone else to read. Just as a way to honor the girl, she once was the one who gave up dreams for family, who endured quietly, who carried so much without complaint. In doing so, she didn't just reclaim her worth, she offered herself forgiveness. And that softened everything? Forgiveness is one of the final and most transformative mindset shifts. Not just forgiving others, but forgiving yourself. For the years you overextended, for the moments you silenced your needs, for believing your worth had an expiration date. When you forgive yourself, you begin to meet yourself with kindness. You stop looking back with regret and start looking forward with curiosity. This is the moment when the fog begins to lift, when you realize that joy isn't behind you, it's around you, in the sound of birds, in the taste of your favorite tea, in the sunlight on your skin, in your own laughter. Yes, yours. So many people over 60 talk about feeling invisible. But here's the truth. You are not invisible. You've just been looking for validation in the wrong places. You've been told that usefulness is measured by productivity, but that's a myth of a younger world. In your season of life, your wisdom is the offering. Your calm is the strength. Your gentleness is the revolution. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to be busy to be valuable. You only have to be rooted in your own light. Let that light guide you. Let it soften the sharp edges of disappointment. Let it remind you, over and over again, that even if the world forgets your name, you still carry a story that matters. And here's the beautiful truth. Someone, somewhere, is quietly drawing courage from your quiet strength. You may not see it yet, but you are not done growing. You are just beginning again this time, on your terms. Thank you, truly, from the bottom of my heart for being here, for sitting with these words, for allowing yourself the space to reflect, and for being willing to look within instead of giving up. That takes a kind of courage most people overlook. But I see it in you, and I want you to know that your willingness to listen, to feel, and to consider new ways of seeing yourself, that's already a powerful act of healing. Maybe today's message stirred something old and tender inside you. Maybe you remembered a time when your worth was constantly questioned. Or maybe you saw a younger version of yourself in some of the stories shared. That's okay. You're not alone in that. So many of us, especially after 60, carry those quiet bruises of being dismissed, of being forgotten, of being needed but not nurtured. But let me tell you something plainly and without hesitation. You were never meant to disappear. You were never meant to fade quietly into the background of other people's lives. The stage of your life is not the ending, it's a return to your voice, your softness, your strength, and yes, your light. If this message touched you in any way, if it made you pause, or even helped you exhale for the first time in a while, I'd love to know. Would you share your story with me in the comments? Has your sense of worth been shaken at times? Have you found little ways to reclaim it? Even if the world hasn't noticed, your voice matters here. You're part of a community that believes in second chances, not just from others, but from ourselves. That believes in quiet bravery and soft strength. That believes being over 60 doesn't mean fading. It means finally stepping into a life that fits your soul, not someone else's expectations. And if this video helped you feel seen, I'd be honored if you'd click that subscribe button. Not for numbers or algorithms, but because I want us to keep walking this journey together. There's so much more to explore. So many more moments of honesty, encouragement, and deep reflection we can share. Every week, we'll keep showing up for ourselves. We'll keep unlearning old beliefs and remembering new truths. And together, we'll build something more beautiful than usefulness. We'll build peace, self-trust, quiet joy, Because after everything you've given to the world, it's time you give that same love to yourself. So, from one heart to another, thank you for being here. I see you, I respect you, and I'm cheering for your next chapter. You are not alone. You are not too late. And you are absolutely not useless. You're becoming whole again. And I hope you'll stay with me for all the soft, strong, beautiful moments ahead.